Have you ever wondered how billions of dollars in profit are made from evaluations for veterans' benefits, even when those very exams are riddled with issues?
Exams to determine whether veterans qualify for benefits have been almost entirely privatized, and the companies conducting the exams have long been cited for poor quality. Congress has continued to expand the role of private exams rather than boost in-house capacity, leading to billions of dollars in contracts and over 8 million private exams. The VA Office of Inspector General found that VES, QTC, and other vendors failed to consistently provide the VA with accurate exams required by the contracts. Senior agency officials discouraged the relay of private exam issues to the regional office level.
Welcome back to the channel, folks. Dr. Sharma here, physician, board-certified psychiatrist, and Air Force veteran. Please hit that like and subscribe button, especially if you're interested in veterans' mental health and benefits. Today, we're discussing contractors who work with the VA, specifically on VA disability examinations or CMP examinations. I'm going to be citing an article from November of last year, along with other sources. This idea was brought to me by a veteran and a viewer of the channel, so thank you. For years, I've been told by veterans about their frustrations with the CMP examination process, not the fact that they get called for exams, but how the exams are conducted. Many veterans have told me their stories about mental health evaluations lasting for 10 minutes when they should be at least 45 minutes, physical exams not being done for medical conditions, insulting remarks from providers, and much more. And in this case, with private contractors and CMP exams, the famous quote, "follow the money," is exactly what we have to do. Let's start with the basics. About 1.4 million CMP exams are done every year. And of course, each one of those exams is crucial for each veteran. It needs to be accurate and comprehensive. Now, in the past, these exams were done by VA clinicians and overseen by administrators within the VA system. However, in the late 90s, that changed. Lawmakers, meaning our politicians, started opening up the work to contractors, and this trend has quickly accelerated over the years. There was a big push to privatize virtually all CMP exams by the end of 2020. This opened the gates to a gold mine in contracts for these exams, and these companies swarmed. Now, in one of the articles I looked at, there's a veteran who is followed through this process. He was a guy who had been deployed to Iraq, had a lot of different exposures while in the Middle East. He also helped operate and later decommission bases. He ended up getting an autoimmune disease because of his exposures. He explains how he went to 6 exams done by QTC and VES, which are prominent contracting companies who do a lot of these exams. He describes bringing military and civilian medical records, prescriptions about his conditions, but nobody was interested. He said it felt like a puppy mill. These companies are trying to do as many exams as they can to make as much money as they can. They simply don't do a thorough job, and they face no consequences. The veteran even described how they tried to draw blood from him, but they didn't apply a tourniquet, the band that goes above where you're drawing the blood. So they poked him 5 or 6 times. Being a trained medic himself, he could see how wrong this was, and of course, his blood results were already in his records, which they should have reviewed. Shumway, the veteran, was working with an accredited agent who submitted a claims accuracy request to the VA for him, and they found 24 errors, 24 errors, many made by private examiners. The veteran said it seems like they had a predetermined conclusion that they wanted to reach. Whatever evidence I had, like prescriptions and paperwork from my rheumatologist, they ignored. Now, the good news is he eventually had his claims looked at appropriately and the situation resolved, but it took 485 days for that to happen. In the end, the VBA admitted to his claim being marked by clear and unmistakable errors, or CUE, and that is very significant. Obviously, his experience is not isolated. Thousands of veterans have been saying this for years. Government watchdogs have been saying it, and even some politicians who are genuinely concerned about veterans. This has been even more significant after the passing of the PACT Act because of the increased volume of claims. Now, what's behind this whole drive to privatize CMP exams? Mainly, it's to get more claims adjudicated because the volume was very high. which makes sense theoretically. But there's a quote from Rick Rousseau, an Army JAG officer who later became a veterans disability lawyer. He said, "Crap at the speed of light is still crap." The other VA accredited agent who helped the veteran I was talking about said, "It's pitiful. The quality of exams is so poor these days, and the taxpayer is paying for all of them." Now, in the span of a few years, QTC had secured almost $1 billion in VA contracts, and somehow they were the only bidder. Apparently, there were other organizations that were interested, and they had even expressed interest to the VA, but they never knew about the bidding. I wonder about that and the role of lobbyists in this whole thing. More on that in a second. It was also reported that QTC exams cost as much as 400% more than VA's in-house services. Imagine how much more money the government had to spend on these private contractors rather than just hiring more people internally. And remember, when the government spends more money, so do we as taxpayers. But it doesn't end there, folks. In 2008, QTC was flagged by the VA OIG for overbilling. In 2011, QTC was actually bought out by Lockheed Martin, which is interesting to say the least. This company has been making money from wars for years, and they decided to move into profiting from the physical and mental wounds from those same wars. Now, over the last decade, the role of private exams has continued to increase, despite all the issues that people have noticed and that we've been talking about. In 2016, a representative and a senator in Congress, one a Republican, the other a Democrat, led a huge expansion in CMP exam outsourcing, and they authorized the VA to contract out exams in any state or American territory. The other prominent company, VES, has also had multiple issues. They sent dozens of veterans to a doctor who was under federal investigation in Florida. They settled a lawsuit with an employee who alleged wage theft. A nurse who worked for VES said the organization was run poorly, and many of its reviewers were unfamiliar with basic medical terms or procedures. She said she was fired after raising questions about their business practices. In 2022, the VA OIG found that both these companies and other CMP exam vendors failed to consistently provide the VA with accurate exams required by the contracts. They also stated that senior officials discouraged the communication of issues with these exams to the regional office. So there's no accountability, there are no lessons learned, contractors aren't docked money for mistakes, and of course there are no changes in behavior because there are no consequences. Andy Gross, an attorney who I work with on cases here in Baltimore, who is also a former JAG officer, was quoted in this article, and he said, "Exam quality has cratered over the last few years, and that's because there is effectively no oversight over the process." Andy estimated that 80% of the claims appeal cases he takes concern bad exams. We also have the evidence of lobbyists for these companies. Remember, I was talking about this before. And as the kids nowadays say, these lobbyists are all up in this process, okay? They're embedded in politics. There are lobbyists for these contractors who previously worked in the government, so they have inside information about how decisions are made. They know people in the government. They know how to grease the wheels to get contracts awarded to their companies, which means more profit for the companies and more bonuses for themselves. Again, this happens without proper oversight and no consideration to what harm befalls veterans in the path of these private exam companies. We also have the testimony from a physician, Dr. Carrie Jackson, who was an Army physician, Gulf War veteran, and worked at the VA previously. She started doing internal CMP exams in the VA back in 2004. She noticed that over time, the agency farmed out exams to private contractors, and there were a lot of complaints from her colleagues and from her patients. She specifically said that exams that used to take her hours were being done by the private sector in minutes. She then said, "My personal opinion is it's fraudulent." She also talked about how it took her years to sharpen her skills in doing CMP exams. She talked about there being quality control metrics within the VA, feedback from leadership, quality improvement initiatives. They kept trying to make things better. Dr. Jackson also talked about how one former VA examiner who went on to work for QTC was prevented from reviewing veterans' claims files, the C file, which is critical because it was time consuming. Also, over time, the oversight has completely diminished. The VA's Medical Disability Examination Office used to be required to do site visits at contractors' facilities. But in 2021, contract language was changed, it was done quietly, so that this was no longer a requirement. The VA also said that private examiners would have to rate their own performance rather than getting feedback from veterans. So no oversight from leadership and no feedback from the veterans who are the clients. In May of last year, OIG identified deficiencies at 114 of the 135 private exam facilities it visited. That's 84% of the sites they visited having deficiencies. They also described veteran complaints. There's moldy, bug-infested offices, facilities that didn't have proper exit doors, faulty equipment, lack of ramps for wheelchairs. In one case, a veteran with a hip condition was placed on a massage table that collapsed, and he injured himself further. Another case where a veteran in a wheelchair was brought into an audio booth without a ramp. The veteran fell to the ground, their eyes rolled back, they began vomiting, and they had to go to the hospital. Andy Gross, the attorney I work with who I was talking about before, gave a presentation where he talked about more cases, like when one examiner continued to practice after being disciplined by the Texas Medical Board for creating a deceptive medical record during a veteran's exam. Andy and his fellow attorney, Rousseau, also talked about a subcontractor hiring bookmakers who are tasked with whittling away the medical file into a few pages. So basically taking medical files that might be hundreds of pages long or thousands of pages and condensing it to a few pages. But the job descriptions for these bookmakers say there is no medical background required or college experience. So literally you have folks without any medical experience deciding which medical records are relevant and which aren't when it comes to different conditions, right? Musculoskeletal conditions, cancers, autoimmune conditions, mental illness, everything. This is madness, right? When I'm reviewing records, I'm the one reviewing the records to make sure that the evidence lines up with what the veteran is trying to do. If not, we don't pursue the case, right? And I'm a physician, so that medical experience is required. There are other reports too, private contractors shredding medical questionnaires instead of adding them to the medical file, veterans being examined in co-working spaces, hotel rooms, broom closets. It's horrendous. And I've heard a lot of this from veterans, them telling me that there were medical offices above convenience stores and different types of conditions that patients should not be subjected to, let alone veterans. Now, I know that was a lot of information, but all of it is critical. We have to be aware of these different issues, the history of these issues, what's being done in politics, and advocate for better CMP exams and policies. As always, we have to remember that veterans' health, benefits, and well-being need to be bipartisan issues. We all need to care about it, and we all have to hold our politicians accountable. Doesn't matter if they're Republican, Democrat, Independent, whatever. We have to hold them accountable. That's it for today's video. I hope this was helpful for you guys to take a deeper look at CMP exam quality, what's behind all these issues, following the money and where it goes, and the history. If you found this helpful, please like, comment, and subscribe to my channel. It really helps, and it tells me that I'm doing something right. Also, please drop a comment below about your thoughts on the topic, experiences you've had in CMP exams, and if you have requests on what topic I should cover in the future. I'd be happy to make a video on it. As always, thanks for watching. Dr. Sharma signing off. See you next time.